Whatever you do before you leave this video, click on the links listed below to enter the giveaway to win this boat and all of its accessories, everything. It is all going to one lucky person on the announcement day. It could be yours, so remember to enter so you can win it all. So, people have requested a lot for a boat that is cheap in materials, easy to build, and lasts a long time. Normally, you can only get 2 out of the 3. You can pick any 2, but not all 3. But in this build, we try to do all 3. First off was the hull. This is a 1950s Starcraft. Whatever it was so old it had wooden gunnels, a wooden transom, and wooden end caps. Things that have not been done for decades. It also had some vintage old lead paint that was so tough and durable that none of today's watered down chemicals would take it off. And nobody wanted to sandblast it in town because the hull was too thin. So we tried to fix what we could. We refixed the gunnels. We found a DIY way to do that. We took one of the aluminum transom kits from our store and installed it. And then there was the issue of the floor. Very difficult, no drain vents, nothing, and the boat contour. So we got a subfloor kit from our website and installed it in here. Made a drainable area, got rid of that contour so you could actually frame something flat on top of this and it'll work. And one of the more annoying things that came along with this was how do we recap the transom and how do we redo the end caps on each side. We started by taking the actual piece that came with a transom kit. I installed that to the best of my ability. To seal places and spots where we would normally have to weld, we used brazing rods from Harbor Freight. And though it wasn't very pretty at first, we kind of shaped it and skimmed it down to where it was a fairly good cosmetic looking version. Most of it was supported by rivets, but yeah, it did take care of that. We ended up also fabricating a DIY version for the end caps, which also worked. But by fixing the gunnels and the end caps and the transom, we created another problem. The bow no longer fit. The old bow cap wouldn't fit the boat anymore. It fits something totally different from what we're doing now. So we had to create and develop a bow kit. We took the exact sheet of metal and we got specific tubing, stuff that would work really well, stuff that we would have to seek out of a metal shop, stuck it in a kit, made it, installed it, and it worked out really well. Everything we did here, we tried to develop for people to have themselves. The only thing we couldn't actually duplicate into a kit that we could sell people is the end caps. Those are just very unique and each one is different. Each boat contours differently. So there's no way of doing that unless you send us in custom templates to our email, which is in the description, by the way, if that's something you wanted to do. Now back to the transom. After we had everything done, we went and we pour foamed in. I got a lot of slack for using pour foam on the bottom, but pour foam is the only USCG approved foaming agent that you can use that counts. Because any sort of styrofoam or pink foam board or any sort of foam board will melt if gasoline touches it. There are enough horror stories about people's subfloors imploding because gas from their tank flew down into the subfloor and melted it. Also, aluminum sheeting went up like 10 times the amount of its equivalent in wood. So obviously, this being a budget build, we used wood for the subfloor. But we resin coated the entire thing on top and on bottom after gridding it to make sure we would have lines to know where to attach the frame to later. And this worked out incredibly well. A lot of this boat is going to have wood in it. The subfloor, the side panels, the static decking. But the one thing that you cannot compromise on is the actual framing. All the framing does need to be done out of aluminum if you want your boat to last at all. We are currently installing the Starter XL kit from our website, and it is just a basic aluminum frame. It's enough to frame the front and the back deck and maybe a little extra. Plus we had some extra angle left over from the subfloor because we did that rather efficiently. And so it all worked. We even got On the Fly jack plates to donate us this sick jack plate. The only one of its kind to do this manually to date, without a linear actuator or a hydraulic or any sort of electronics or relays or switches, any of it. Completely manual. After this point, I had no choice but to get off the rest of the paint of the boat. I delayed it because I had no idea what I would do it, but then somebody turned me on to oven cleaner. Apparently, oven cleaner will eat off the crappiest and most robust paint on this boat. And that is essentially how I was able to even get it off. And now that brings us to present. While I was on the last project at our shop in Illinois, I saw some of these oddball hatches that were just kind of back there. I snagged those, and I also snagged a bunch of turf. Some robust turf that we can use and it'll get used and abused and nobody will care. We'll be selecting a few of these to go inside the boat and the rest of them will go on into later projects. We'll explain why we're using aluminum hatches while everything else is going to be wood. We'll get into that because that'll all be in this video. First things first though, we have to polish up the top of the subfloor. Did I mention that when I did this, I resin coated the bottom of the subfloor, flipped it over, secured it, forgot to resin coat the top, left it outside, didn't think it would rain, but it did, and it rained a lot. I had to wait till it dried completely, and then I resin coated over it, which is why it's discolored. I then sanded it down, polished it up a little bit, and then re-resin coated it, but not before securing the rest of the deck. with a bunch of 1-inch rivets. We have an entire series on this subfloor specifically, but this is just the end result of how we polished it up. When we hit it with an orbital sander, knocked it all flat, and then went over it with this one, it looked like a tabletop. It was very nice and glossy and perfect, which is what we need because we're going to be sticking EVA foam with adhesive over it. A lot of questions on that. We're going to show you exactly how you would make that happen on wood, because a lot of the rumors floating around is that it won't stick to wood. That's a lie. You just have to do some things to the wood to make it happen. But first, let's frame this boat, shall we? After all, the deck isn't going to support itself. We're framing the boat around these hatches. They have to fit the whole size, so there's a little bit of measuring and pre-fitting, and then it's fairly easy. And the rest of the stuff, we are prepping for the static wood deck and all the wood panels coming. So we framed it out to just here. That's what we're going to have. We're going to have catwalks. We're going to have a capable but a modest front deck, and we're going to have a bigger cockpit area, so when people want to bring backpacks and coolers, you can stick it in here and it's fine. Now we're just going to take care of the bottom framing, line up the bottom framing. The goal here is to have a more conservative, family-friendly platform that you can still fish off of effectively. So that will require a large cockpit that you can hold lots of gear and coolers in, and some bench seats that people can actually sit on. So we're framing those in. Now that I've seen what it can be, now that I framed it and I made the catwalks, which would make fantastic rod lockers, I just, like, my mind goes crazy when I see the frame. Like, you just don't know how good a boat could be, but this boat could be so epic. If you guys have a boat like this and you've got it back to code and you've taken all the wood weird stuff and the old ancient and archaic ways of doing things, you put it back to where it's going to be, and once you frame it, you can see what it really would become. And so we're keeping it modest at a 4-foot deck, which is pretty modest. And then we could make a little step up here. We might still do that. That might still be a thing where we just put a little step up emergency thing in stores like the fire extinguisher and some other things right there, like first aid kit. These could be lockers. I could totally fabricate these into lockers, dual lockers, the sickest lockers ever. You know, I had to like sit there and smack my hand. I was like, Mike, no, do not go crazy. Stick to the plan. No, 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 no. Don't do it. Stick to the plan. And the plan is still wood decks, not aluminum, no crazy storage. We're going to have storage cut away right here for the batteries. One on each side, one for the accessories, one for the trolling motor. If you guys are wanting an up-close look at what I planned when I made these, this is how I would do it. I mean, we filled this in a little bit better. Obviously, we poured some more last night to fill it in and cut it flush. And then we'll resin coat over this, but essentially the water comes, drains in, and we'll make this a little lower because it's a little high right now. But water will just come and naturally drain down these tubes. Down it will go. And we'll mat over this and poke and cut the holes where it would be, because we can mat over this with some sort of matting, and we will do that before we go too far into this. This is generally going to be a rod locker for somebody, and it's so hard to have a sealed compartment like what we did over there. You can't do that with a rod locker. There are no oblong compartments. You'd have to seal them off and make them sealed, and there's almost no point to seal them. The water has to go somewhere. So why not have it be here and drain in and drain out? I haven't done this in so many boats, but on the boat that I did do it, you know, I loved it. And it just never really fit what I was doing before again, but it totally fits this boat now. This is 5/8, or no, this is 5-ply 1/2 inch. Pretty good quality wood. It's like not marine grade, but it's the better quality wood that you would get at the hardware store. I would recommend this. I wouldn't get the cheap knotted up like this. This wood that has a million problems and voids and clear problems with the whole piece, where this was just the scrap plywood. Don't get that. Get quality plywood. And it'll still have voids. It won't be perfect. It won't be like marine grade, but it'll work pretty good. All it's gonna do is just be static and sit there. So oddly, we'll probably just be able to barely get away with just 2 sheets. So this is 4 foot wide, and the deck just ends at 4 foot. So if we cut it right here, taper it, at its widest end, we'll still have a little bit left over that we can do other things, and then we'll have that one in between that. We should be able to take care of the catwalks and the back deck. And it's pretty much perfect. Now you can't get away with what I did all the time, but see how the walls are fairly straight up, and I knew that I had to compensate for it a little bit towards the top where it would taper more. I knew that. So I just did that. I traced it, but if the walls are fairly straight, you can just trace the whole thing, but generally in the V-hulls, the walls flare out way out like that, and so it's not practically, you have to go in here with a measuring tape and measure, and then draw dots with the measuring tape, and draw dots on this end, and keep doing it until like you find your edge. But It's way better to do that if you have two people to do that. It sucks to do it if you're by yourself, and so I just winged it. Because it's a nice, perfect straight edge, we'll go ahead and we'll cut the other pieces that'll just overlay the catwalk. Check out this trick. It's more or less, you measure the max width right here, and then you equal that width the whole time with a marker. It's coming out. Good time to label top so you don't accidentally mess it up on the bottom. This one, we did one mistake, is that we didn't leave an overhanging gap. We left an overhanging gap, and that's because later on we're gonna put a sidewall with turf on it, and then you don't want that sticking past your gap here like it will over here, where we clearly forgot to do that. They're pretty flush. I got the perfect depth. They're like super flush, meaning it'll be good whenever. And then I really didn't know what I was doing too much with a router with a wood. It's different to route wood, much harder to route wood than it is foam. I kind of figured it out on this run. Screwed it up pretty bad over here, so that's just more resin that's going to soak into the cracks. It's annoying, is what it is though. But when I go to actually rip this deck down, it'll be because the other side's preserved. So we're going to take these hedges off, set them aside, flip this over, resin coat the bottom, probably resin coat that piece too. We got pretty darn far. Imagine what we could do with just like one more day of hard work. Probably finish this stupid thing. I think you could. That router really kind of gets away from me. This one's really powerful. Thing kept, dude, I would never make it as a woodworker. I'd get fired. I would never make it. Not like so many wood fails. It's just everything I do, you guys can never tell after it's all done. But if it just had to look at the wood, you'd be like, I'm not going to hire you. I'm not buying your stuff. This is a wood sheet. Those are some aluminum sheets over there. $50, $439. It's a no-brainer. Now, those are 090 sheets. Like, those are thicker sheets. They cost a lot. The 1/8 inch sheet over there too is obscenely. I don't even know how anybody can afford aluminum. Like I stockpiled a lot of it over the years, and so I have like this little bit left to build all these boats, and then I don't know what I'm gonna do. Just gonna have to take the hit and like everybody else is. But it was a no-brainer to use the wood for the static panels. What else is it gonna do? It's just gonna sit there, right? It's gonna sit there. Your kit, guys. The safety kit and the electric kit. I know like both of them are kind of mixed here together, but this is the electric kit. We'll be going more over this, but we got the wire for the trolling motor. We got the wire to run all the lights, the LEDs, the bilge pumps. Then we got the bilge pumps, the bilge hose. I got another, snagged one from Walmart just because I like the auto bilges. Then we got our safety kits, which are, we have these. Running this one, I mean, you need nothing more than the 6 to run your basic stuff. Your nav lights and your bilge pumps need nothing more than the 6 And we had a switch panel here too, yeah. Switch panel. We might actually add a phone charger, just whole saw it right in there. But they come with phone chargers, like nice ones, USB ports and everything. So, and you can switch those out, those little ports with cigarette lighters, whatever you want to do. What's this? Oh yeah, it's a starter. We got the kill switches. We might do a battery selector switch because, in my opinion, like the noob who rents this boat is probably very unlikely. But in the event that they can't crank the battery, I would like them to switch over to the accessory battery to crank the battery. We'll see how it goes. But this is all going in the boat. That'll take a little bit of time. The wiring takes a little bit of time. Even that's not even that much. That'll take some time. It really will. So maybe 4 days. Realistically a week, but you can get a whole lot done in a day. In a weekend, you can get most of it done. Within the week, you can polish it all up and then be on the water the next weekend, right? Yeah.
Come and join the largest and fastest growing social media platform for small boat building and fishing. Come and show your pictures off, show your boats and your fish. Come give advice, come get advice.
Now it's all about under supports. So just mind you, I'm using my own stock to get this much framing in. You cannot get this much framing with the Starter XL kit. You would need to get the Pro or definitely the Premium kit. We are framing a lot in here. We are T-framing the 1/16 inch together. You get a pretty good support system when you T-frame it crossways. And also, if you want to run it through under support, you can T-frame it. It's also really good. But we're using tubing included in the kits for the subfloor and the framing kit to use most of the under supports, which you're seeing underneath this. Altogether, it's going to work pretty well for the benches and all the support. It's 3/16 inch hardwood plywood. It's just a way to side the panels. It's cosmetic. It is not load bearing. We are not using any sort of side panel to be a load bearing aspect. This is just completely 100% cosmetic. And so hardwood is fine as long as it's resin coated or painted thoroughly. It actually lasts for a pretty long time. Not a whole lot of worry for residual saturation of water because it's vertical. Now, it comes into contact with water, obviously, but it doesn't stay wet. So I've used hardwood panels for a long time. They're one of the things that actually last the longest, even though they're the crappiest piece of plywood ever. Still last longer just because of the nature of where we're actually assembling it. Did I mention this was $30? And say we went and got some 040 sheets of aluminum, that would be again like 5 to 6 times as much. You're pretty much saving 5 to 6 times as much on cost by going for wood. Sometimes, in some cases, 10 times as much. Okay, so this is what I decided to do for the electric problem because space is tight. We're gonna have, these are the major battery compartments. We're gonna have one on each side. One over there, trolling motor, accessories. We're gonna have the accessory panel in here. Took some 2x2s and a piece of that hardwood. We're gonna resin coat this all, but it slides right in this section, right in there. And then we're going to cut it out. And then the switch panel, which I popped all the switches out there right there. The switch panel comes with our electric kit. We'll just go right in there. Like so. Right in there. And then we're going to resin coat all this, finish a little bit of these edges up, and then paint that black in there, obviously. And then we still have to resin coat this. And I couldn't get that thing out once I popped it in. To get it out would be to break it, so I left it in there. So we'll be resin coating this, which is fine because we have to resin coat this now that we trimmed it. And then we'll be able to kind of trim and figure out what we're going to do mainly with this spot, as we'll have room for like one group 24 AGM or lead acid battery, and the other end will hold another one, plus possibly the starting battery. All right, so Bridger came, and since then, this is actually going much faster. We got all the panels in. We just gotta tie up some things back here that I have to do, that I knew I was gonna have to do. And then after that, we're just going to, we're gonna run holes for the conduits with a hole saw. Then we're gonna use the PVC piping, and we'll run 2 major ones from the front to back, front to mid on each side, and then 2 out of the flex piping from here to here. And that will we'll pretty much have a 360 run around of whatever we have to run through wires to each part. So that is actually a 1 1/8 inch flexible bilge hose that I think I got at West Marine or Amazon, one of the two, but it makes fantastic conduits that bend around and they don't weigh anything. But the other pipes were PVC, gray conduit piping that my dogs chewed on, and I finally just had a use for them. That's what's in the front of the boat. Now that we've got it all in, all the panels are in, we are sealing it all with gap filler. We generally use quad foam because it's closed cell, but it doesn't matter because the gap filler open cell or closed cell is not going to be used for any sort of reserve buoyancy. It is using to fill gaps that the actual pour foam would otherwise run into and start creating havoc and destruction and mayhem. For the pour foam, we are going to be using fairly big buckets in large quantities all at once. We are trying to use the biggest bulk quantity without overfilling it, so trying to time that has always been a crapshoot. Half the time we mess it up, and half the time we get it right.
it's too late now, man. We're committed.
I know. It sucks. I gotta keep my finger here until it starts to expand, and then I forgot all about that hole. That shit's really hot.
This is Mike's side.
With Richard here, we were able to install all the side panels, pour all the foam, run all the conduits, and even start prepping the top of the decks. The bottom of the deck is resin coated and prepped and fine. We are using an orbital sander with 220 grits. You can even go 320, probably get a little bit better finish if that's your last thing. So with Richard here, it turns out we can get 2 days ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
It's much easier to focus and not orbital sanded the decks flat. So when you do put the resin in, it does seal the wood, but it also makes the wood kind of bubble and warp. It's very similar to how if it had just got rained on, it just does that. And so what you do is you go and you hit it, you sand it flat, and then that's how the wood stays permanently. And then now you give it one more coat of resin, but not until after we secure down these decks and we put the hatches in. After we've secured the hatches down, rivet them down to the frame, got all that stuff done, then we give it its final little coat of resin. All right, quick review of what we did. We're gonna stop for right now, but what we have coming next is all the wiring and rigging that we have prepped. We got all of it right there with our electric kits and our safety kits. We snagged a pretty sweet little, standard fish finder for $105 at Walmart. That was a steal. Now we could have gone real budget-ish and just used straight up wood, because for every part that we cut out for wood, we could have just used that as an actual panel. Why we didn't do that is because we're trying to meet the longevity factor. Now, longevity-wise, wood, if it just sits there and is protected and all it does is just stay there and bolt it down to the frame, it actually lasts a very, very long time. Even non-protected wood lasts years and years and years. It's when you try to make it as a panel. The Tiny Boat Nation has been making wood hatches for a very long time and try to add struts to wood hatches. I've done it, and over time it just fails. They last you a year, like 1 to 3 years, under constant stress. The screws pull out of the wood starts to do its organic thing and bustle and break. And then you have to either try to refit it, but this doesn't work very well. And they also start to warp. You got to do certain things to make wood hatches not warp. It's just a lot more maintenance and time. And after you figure in all the extra costs of the resin and all the extra maintenance and time making the wood hatch for it to not last near as long as the aluminum hatch, it starts to make sense that you might as well just buy an aluminum hatch or make some. So these are the dry track ones. We actually sell Gen X lid builder systems where you can just kind of build your own aluminum hatch at a DIY level, but you'll have to raise the deck to 3/4 inch high, and that will require more maintenance to the deck. So normal people who are building their own hatches through the Gen X system are making static terminal panels where most of the deck is all hatches, and then there are only a few select parts like these tapering panels that end up being wood or Cusa or whatever, and it makes more sense. But right here, because most of the whole thing is wood, pretty much all the deck with the exception of the cutouts or hatches, we definitely want this to last long. I believe very strongly, based off of everything we've done ever, that static wood paneling, when preserved right in conjunction with very nice, thick, robust, well-made aluminum hatches from our shop, this boat will last 30 years. Like this. Most of it's going to be out of wood, but because of how it's made, because the framing is aluminum, and because the hatches, the major components of all the storage, is aluminum, it's going to make it. It will last a very long time. And then the bow plate kit, and I know the transom were all done out of aluminum, and I know that's breaking the rules for the budget build, but most of the time you're going to get a boat and it's going to have these things in place, and you're not going to have to replace those unless you want to. So this boat didn't even have them, so let's just pretend that those aren't part of the actual deal. I wanted to show you those because that is what we did, if you're wondering. And that's another reason why this will last a long time. We don't have to worry about the transom rotting or cracking or degrading over time, and the bow plate is nice and very robust. I also didn't include that we went and welded. We learned to weld on this boat. That was also pretty epic, but I didn't include that in the recap reel because I just don't know where the footage went. But we pretty much did this seamlessly. Got that. We welded that all so it's like one piece to the boat. That was pretty dope. Looks all crap because of all the oven cleaner, so we're gonna have to go and scrub that. So part between before we put the turf on, we're gonna have to prep this, paint this, paint the edges of the deck. One of the things I didn't talk about is before we do the final resin coat, we're going to kind of prep these edges and then paint them so they're kind of smooth. They look like a nice finished surface, so when you cut the turf, it'll look nice. Because generally this is done out of aluminum. Patches sit on top of the frame in the hole size like we did, but then it's always like 090 sheeting around the whole thing as the static paneling, and then you just lay the turf and you cut it flat on the overhang. And so the only thing different is we're gonna have to attack the overhang differently, but we will be doing that. We'll be prepping, we'll be resining, and then sanding, and then eventually painting the edges black so they will match the paneling and they'll match everything else. You essentially will not be able to tell that any of this was wood unless you specifically look for things that might give it away. But at first glance, you're not gonna know that any of this was wood, unless of course you watch these videos. Then you'll know immediately. The benches were what they were. They were a nice, easy way to add a lot of reserve buoyancy to make this boat pretty hard to sink. That's got over 1,000 pounds of reserve buoyancy, meaning 1,000 pounds of actual pour foam worth of mass volume of pour foam. So one kit does about 300 pounds. This thing has got 4 kits of foam in it. 2 in the subfloor, 2 kits worth of foam in all the major compartments. It's really got quite a bit of foam in there. There's definitely very, very close to 1,000 pounds of reserve buoyancy. The whole boat doesn't weigh that. The whole boat with 2 people in gear probably will not even weigh that. We're gonna run a 20 horse in the back, 20 horse, 100 pounds, a gas tank, another 90 pounds. The batteries will be running lithiums. If we have to go to lead acid or AGM, still not gonna be enough to put over the cap. We were running this boat to some old timers that are just wanting to go troll for striper, or to somebody who just wants to get on the boat out in the lake real quick. And then we're going to have bigger, more capable boats, including some that are much nicer and more capable with better storage. This is like one of 5 boats that we want to put out, including some hunting boats and some duck boats, or some multi outdoor boats that can do hunting, fishing, whatever. All that, we want to put that in here. Just it'll take a little bit of time, but we'll get it done. All right, guys, I'm headed to Florida, or actually probably it was Florida and Georgia, but the way things are going, it's looking like we're probably just going to go to Georgia unless things change tomorrow. Tomorrow is like the definitive day. That's where we'll be going. You'll see some videos coming from that, and then we'll be right back to this. And then it's only got like 1 or 2 days of work, and then it's done. It's done. It's ready to go. Be a cakewalk. Stay tuned for that. It'll be very exciting. See ya.